Hi everyone, it's Tim. Welcome to North and South podcasts, and today we are going to talk about reason, using reasoning and rational thinking in our lives, heroes that we might have, and also beliefs that we have and how we view our place in the world. And I just want to tell you about a great podcast that I listened to about Stoicism, because I listen to the Stoic Coffee Break podcast every week. I think it's out on a Monday or a Tuesday. Well worth a listen. But the guy on it sometimes does extended interviews. And he was on another podcast recently called Conversation with Brian from the Lots Project. That was released under Stoic Coffee Break. But basically the Lots Project is to do with people who step outside the system. Don't know exactly what LOT stands for, but the guy who does that podcast lives in a mobile home with his girlfriend, travelling around, etc. And he spoke to the guy from the Stoic coffee shop, whose name escapes me, about how Stoicism in day-to-day life can free you from the mental pressures and the financial pressures and the expectations that we put on ourselves every day. So well worth a go. Now, in terms of rationalism, I've been having a few online debates with people recently who I probably shouldn't be having online debates with, because they're never going to change their mind and they can be quite opinionated and think they're right and everyone else is wrong. But I listened to a podcast recently by Sam Harris, and he had a guest on who spoke about how there's four types of people, and when it comes to evidence and reason. And the first one is the scientist, who has an opinion but can be changed by the evidence and listens to what other people say and uses evidence to ground their theories. The second person is the sports fan, who might support a team, but then when they see a video and say, okay, fair enough, that event did happen, so I accept that decision. My way of seeing the world as I first saw it is different. Then we've got the advocate, the lawyer, who, regardless of the evidence, argues a particular position. That might be because they are paid to do so and that's their profession in the courtroom. Again, we might accept that in that kind of place. And then we've got the zealot, who thinks they're right and is not swayed by any evidence. And I've wasted quite a bit of emotional energy recently talking to a zealot online from a particular group, and I really don't know why I persevere with it. I just need to ignore him. And sometimes saying it out loud, like on a podcast like this, might make that more likely to happen without having the final word. I am generally quite good online. I don't go on Twitter very much, other than to just share info about my podcast, because I don't know, Twitter's just like having negative voices, just writ large, winding everyone up and having a go at each other. I'm not interested in that. It just drags me down. Who are you in that list? Are you a scientist, a sports fan, an advocate, or a zealot? And in different fields, you might be different. So you might be a religious person, you might be interested in politics, you might be whatever. And think about what those four categories are, which one are you, and how maybe can you move yourself up the list. Of course, since COVID-19 and Trump and Boris in the Anglo-Saxon world, there's no such thing as experts, and all science is just an opinion now anyway. So the zealots think that they're above the scientists, but let's not go there today. So who are you? I think it's important that we question everything, and that we question who tells us to question everything most of all. I forget who said that quote, but it was along the lines of question everything, question me most of all, the person who told you that. And I think it's important to use that kind of Socratic method from Socrates to question your fundamental beliefs. And when you meet someone like a Trump or a Johnson, we immediately, very quickly realise that you're not dealing with someone who can turn the camera or turn the mirror or the lens on themselves. Just really, really opinionated, egotistical liars. So the Greeks had a fine tradition of understanding who we were, etc. And again, as I keep mentioning, the Greeks said, know thyself. That came from the oracle at Delphi, that you should know yourself before you do anything else. And The Buddhists say that you can find an inner calm within you, which can help you in the world. Confucius said that decide what higher order you're loyal to and be part of that higher order. And then you've got the Greeks who said that we are better when we are involved in things, when we participate. Aristotle said to live the good life is to be involved in the politics of the polis, or the political community. So whatever the good life is, whatever happiness is, you decide. It's important to remember that people are a product of their environment, and I think Plato's story of the cave, where if people are born in a cave and you can see the shadows on the back of the cave, if they spend their whole life thinking that the shadows on the back of the cave from the sunlight outside is the real world, if you take them outside and say, here's the actual real world, many of them will go back in because that's all they know. And a lot of us are like that in our day-to-day lives, particularly when maybe other people tell you stuff that doesn't quite accord with your worldview. And we can often be very reluctant to accept that. I think as you get a bit older as well, you become a little bit more stuck in your ways. I remember being outside the hospital once and there was a smoker with like an oxygen tank, and he was smoking while on this oxygen tank. And I remember just looking, thinking, wow, like he views himself as a smoker that much that whatever acute health problem he's got, he is addicted to that smoke and he is not going to change. And I remember thinking how sad that was, but we probably all do things like that in our own ways, often without knowing it, to a less stark example than that. But it might be that you hear or read of a study that might help in terms of managing a health condition you've got, but people go, oh no, I don't want to change, and oh, I like this too much in order to change my diet to maybe try and deal with a particular health problem better. I remember someone telling me that they got told by a doctor that they really, really needed to stop drinking, and they said, I'm not prepared to do that. And again, these things are important to us. We get addicted to things, and it can be hard to change, but when someone says to you that to prolong your life, it would be better if you did A, based on the balance of probabilities, and you're unable to do that, I think it's very interesting that we often reject this advice. In life, I think everything needs to be on the table, and I'll give you an example. I'm an Everton fan. I know fundamentally it's just a sport and it's just a game and it doesn't mean a thing, and I kind of choose to take football seriously at times and to get a little bit too emotionally involved. But I've actually stopped watching the games live a lot of the time and just either watching the highlights later and listening to podcasts and analysis which interest me, rather than the raw emotions of the game, because I don't think I'm a very nice person during the game. And I think that's an example of where moving away from the situation can actually make you a better person, while at the same time acknowledging that those emotions can be a release. And as long as you know it's not the end of the world and it's not important, we often act like they do. But again, this comes down to the like red pill, blue pill. I know this is only a game, but I choose to take it seriously, which you get in the great film The Matrix. But what defines us and others, I think, is our opposition to what we don't like. So sometimes you can say that the Everton fan is defined by not being the Liverpool fan locally, or I have political beliefs which are quite nebulous and vague, but I know I'm not a conservative, so I'll always vote against the conservative. It might be that you're a rigid ideologue, so anyone from the other side or anyone who's slightly different, you just close ranks against them. And often it's the ego of the other who seems unwilling to change that hardens your position, even though deep down you often know that your position is quite subjective as well. So for example, that person who I've been debating with online thinks that they know the truth and their narrow ideological group that they're in is right and that everyone else is wrong, and they just need to explain that to people and educate them, and then everyone will be of their opinion. But I'm coming at it from there. Well, it's not quite as straightforward as that, is it? Well, I agree with what a lot of what you say. It's not quite as straightforward as that. But this person just can't be reasoned with. And sometimes you need to say, okay, let it go. I'm not getting wound up because that person won't change. So it's about not giving that person that power. And I need to be really brave and really strong and not get involved in conversations with that person. When we have our opponent or the other side that we don't like, or our fear of the other, we then construct our own narratives to oppose it. Now, as I said before, the Buddhist view is that there's always suffering in the world, and part of the solution is to acknowledge that there's suffering and then to let it go. And there was a great book by David Hawkins called Letting Go, about how we can let go of a lot of the things in our life that make us miserable, and we can actually make ourselves a lot better. But we can still join groups to make the world a better place, join with others to fight for things that we want, that we feel are important. And by fight, I mean putting forward your ideas, etc. But those groups need to be open groups that allow varied opinion and objections. But again, a lot of people in those types of groups often say, well, the other side aren't like that, so we make ourselves weak. And that's why it's so hard when you've got that fear of the other and this race to the bottom, that we actually make the whole human experience worse. One example might be the political situation in the UK since Brexit, with the Johnson government and the impact of Trump in the USA. And again, I'm picking on the Anglo-Saxon models because that's the big impact on my life. Whatever happens in the United States impacts here as well. And it's not good for anyone to get dragged into the dirt in culture war and nonsense and mind games under people like Trump and Johnson. Although it might benefit their short-term ego, does it benefit the rest of us by identifying with these people because we just hate the other side that much? But that's another story. Cost of living. Obviously, to say that you just need to meditate and improve yourself, etc., in a world of cost of living crisis. I mean, this is in the developed world. A lot of people in the world struggle daily just to make ends meet. But I heard today that in the richest country in the world, 60% of people in the United States are living paycheck to paycheck. And in the UK, I have experienced the impact of the cost of living crisis, or cosy lives, as they call it in Australia, where basic things are a lot more expensive and life is so much harder. It causes us lots of stress. And sometimes being in groups that are trying to make that better, we do need to be in these groups, and we do need to put across our visions for a better world, which can sometimes mean coming up against people who are opposed to that because they have their own opinions on what makes a better world. So that can be tough as well when you're dealing with that kind of conflict, and that turns a lot of people off from politics, which I think is sad, because politics is how we make things better. Don't give up on everything, and don't think that government politics and the politics you see on TV and the newspapers is real politics. Politics is what you do and what you think and who you mix with every single day. I think it's important as well to acknowledge, as a UK citizen, that I'm very lucky to live in the UK. It could be a lot worse. And although there might be better countries to live in, based on the veil of ignorance argument put forward by John Rawls, where you forget what position you're currently in and say, what is the average like in that country? And there are a lot of countries that come out on top of the UK, such as the Scandinavian countries, etc. But be grateful for what you've got. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, you need to be grateful for what you've got, but also you need to make sure that we're looking to make this world better for ourselves and our future selves. And I always remember the Manic Street Preachers: if we tolerate this, our children will be next. So yeah, choose your heroes, choose your beliefs, things you want to work for, and try to be as rational and reasonable as possible. So I am very lucky to live in the UK, despite the things about the UK which I find very concerning. One example might be the housing situation. Buying a house now, young people, they're just doomed to excessive rents, and living at home long term, it's very, very difficult. And governments are too scared to upset homeowners and people who vote, who tend to be over 50 in the UK situation, building new homes on green belts, etc., that might devalue the property market or reduce the cost of housing. Many people don't want that, who've already got their homes. So very difficult. Housing blights other nations as well, but there are other countries that get it a lot better than us. And again, I was listening to the Austrian housing policy in Austria. It might be in Vienna specifically, which again isn't perfect, but normal people can afford housing. The Netherlands and Germany, often you have professionals who rent the whole life, who live in the same neighbourhoods as people from other groups, socio-economic groups, and you get a bit more social mix. And I'm sure life isn't perfect there, but again, these are the things we need to fight for. I'm going to do a separate podcast on Maslow, but Maslow came up with a theory of needs, a hierarchy of needs, and what he kind of said is that once we get our basic needs met, we move up to the next level and we expect more, and we're constantly looking for things until we achieve self-realization, etc., which is quite a positive theory, but negatively as well, human beings are often never happy, and once they have something provided for, they're often looking for the next thing. And we need to be mindful of this constant belief that when we get the next thing, or when the next thing happens, I'll be happy then, and postponing our happiness. We need to believe that we can get things better, but by being happy in the moment as well. And I know that that can be a difficult thing to balance off. The most important thing in your life, and the most important belief you should have, is your belief that happiness for you and meaning for you and contentment for you day to day is the most important thing. Before you think about anyone else, those things are very, very important. And if you get that right, then you can join groups with others to make the world a better place. You also need to remember there's times to stand up for yourself and to try and change things, and there's times to surrender and to know that certain things you can't change, and to just let those things go. And that, I think, is probably the essence of wisdom. And you have beliefs, you've got boundaries, but they're not rigid, and you need to be able to think, what can I control, what can I not control, and how can I recognise the difference between them. Right, that was just a little bit of a chat about the importance of rationalism and reason, about choosing who your heroes are, what you believe in, and knowing that there are things that we should be striving for to make better, but also making sure that we don't lose the present moment, because that's the place where we spend all our lives. How can you be happy in the present moment? How can you make yourself content and better and more effective? And also that is then the springboard for you changing the world one little thing at a time with others. Cheers, look after yourselves.